They were painted as fragile, pure, innocent. They floated across polished floors in lace gowns, carried parasols beneath the burning sun, and sat in pews with eyes lowered as hymns filled the air. But history forgot to tell you something. Behind the locked doors of plantation mansions, some of these women carried unspeakable desires. Desires that turned into disturbing acts so filthy that generations conspired to bury them. They were called ladies of refinement, but in the shadows they became something else entirely. Listen closely. The flicker of a candle against wooden beams, the slam of a door locking from inside, the sound of heavy breathing, muffled in the silence of night. And beneath it, the trembling voice of an enslaved man who knew he could never escape. This is not the story that was written in the textbooks. This is the story they tried to hide. The story of what white mistresses did in secret rooms with black male slaves. A story that will break your heart, disturb everything you thought you knew about the past, and stain forever the polished portraits of so-called gentlewomen. Tonight the curtain is pulled back, and once you hear these truths, you will never look at history the same way again. The stage is the 18th and 19th century, the deep American South and the sprawling Caribbean plantations. Mansions rose like temples of wealth, surrounded by endless rows of sugarcane and cotton. Inside, pianos played delicate tunes, women practiced embroidery, and voices sang hymns that preached morality and virtue. From the outside, it looked like order. From the inside, it was obsession. For in these homes, white women carried far more power than history dared admit. At night, when the fields grew silent and chains rattled faintly in the slave quarters, when the house lights glowed faintly through curtains, something sinister unfolded. Some of the very women praised as paragons of purity turned the shadows into a stage for disturbing acts. They were not simply victims of patriarchy, as history painted them. They became perpetrators, their secrets hidden beneath lace gloves and polite smiles. And the men who bore the weight of these filthy obsessions? Black male slaves, defenseless, voiceless, trapped in a nightmare where refusal could mean death. What if those elegant women in oil portraits carried the nastiest truths of slavery? What if their silks and pearls were nothing more than costumes, hiding a hunger so disturbing it could never be spoken aloud? The system of slavery stripped away freedom, dignity, and voice from millions. Enslaved men were not men in the eyes of the law. They were property. They could be bought, sold, beaten, and killed with no consequence. They were emasculated in public, their humanity reduced to brute strength, their bodies chained to labor. Yet in secret, they were fetishized. They became the objects of disturbing fascination, caught in a web of lust and power where they had no control. White women, meanwhile, were presented as powerless, trapped under their husband's dominance. But that was only half the truth. While denied certain freedoms, many exercised a darker form of authority in private. Authority that came without witnesses, without records, without accountability. For the enslaved men they targeted, there was no way out. If they resisted, they could be whipped, mutilated, or lynched. If they complied, they carried the unbearable weight of silence. It was a system designed to crush them either way. This imbalance created a breeding ground for the unspeakable, and some mistresses thrived in it. They waited until the house fell quiet. They orchestrated excuses to send others away. They used the cover of night to lure enslaved men into secret rooms, attics, basements, storage chambers, sometimes even the sanctity of their own bedrooms. By day, they were women of grace. By night, they unleashed filthy acts that blurred the line between intimacy and domination, passion and cruelty. Every glance, every whispered word carried danger. For the enslaved man, silence was survival. But silence does not erase the truth. Silence does not erase the trauma. And silence cannot erase history. The whispers of these filthy secrets echo through time. Behind polished doors, white mistresses turned bedrooms into cages. They summoned enslaved men into attics where beams creaked under their weight, into storage rooms smelling of grain and mildew, into parlors where the firelight flickered against lace curtains. By day, these women performed gentility, smiling at neighbors, teaching their daughters piano scales. By night, They crossed thresholds into unspeakable worlds, driven by obsessions they dared not speak aloud. Power disguised itself as intimacy. To outside eyes, a mistress was fragile, powerless, controlled by her husband. But within the secret room, she was ruler, and the enslaved man was stripped of choice. He could not resist. He could not refuse. The threat hung heavy in the air. A word against her meant torture, dismemberment, death. And so silence became the only protection he had, though it was no protection at all. Every moment of forced closeness was a violation carved into his soul. Some mistresses confessed in hidden journals, writing cryptic lines about temptations and tests of purity. Others left behind whispers in letters later burned or locked away in family trunks. Rumors moved like smoke through plantations, of women obsessed with the very men they pretended to despise, of mixed-race children born in shame, quietly sent away to mask the truth, of scandals erased from ledgers to preserve the illusion of white virtue. Fetishization rotted at the core of it. Enslaved men were reduced to objects of lust, stripped of humanity, treated as experiments in desire. White mistresses, forbidden by law and society to express these obsessions publicly, created private theaters of cruelty where power and lust collided. It was not romance. It was not love. It was domination dressed as intimacy, a filthy masquerade in lace and candlelight. And what happened to those caught in these lies? For the enslaved men, discovery was a death sentence, whipped until flesh hung loose, lynched beneath trees while the mistress wept crocodile tears, pretending she was victimized. The truth was twisted to protect her reputation, while his body bore the price of her desire. These were not isolated scandals. They were patterns buried beneath silence, patterns that Black history and Black culture carried forward as wounds, as warnings, as whispers of things too dangerous to speak. The impact on the victims was shattering. Imagine a man enslaved by day, forced to bend under back-breaking labor, his body aching with exhaustion. And then imagine the night when his chains did not free him, but tightened around his soul. Double chains, one of iron, one of silence. His dignity shattered, his manhood weaponized against him. Families destroyed as marriages fractured, children born of coercion disappeared, lives haunted by memories too disturbing to share. Psychological torment rippled through generations. Fathers unable to protect their wives, husbands powerless to shield daughters, men humiliated and emasculated in ways designed to crush the spirit. Women enslaved alongside them watched, carrying their own grief, knowing that resistance meant losing the men they loved. And for the men caught in these secret rooms, survival meant burying trauma so deep that even memory became dangerous. Whispered family stories tell of grandfathers used in ways that could not be spoken aloud. Stories of great uncles who carried the pain in silence, their eyes distant, their voices heavy. These unspeakable truths live not in history books, but in silences at dinner tables, in songs that mourned unnamed sorrows, in prayers whispered to a God who seemed far away. Imagine living a life where your silence was the only thing keeping you alive, where your very survival depended on carrying the secrets of your oppressor, even as those secrets broke your soul. This was not intimacy. This was not love. This was slavery extending its chains into the bedroom, into the body, into the mind. And it left scars that time could not erase. But silence never lasts forever. Even the dirtiest truths, even the nastiest secrets, find ways to leak through the cracks. Silence cracked when enslaved men and women began to speak, though their voices trembled under the threat of violence. Slave narratives, rare but courageous, carried disturbing revelations. Some told of white mistresses whose obsessions destroyed lives. Others described nights of forced servitude where refusal meant death. These testimonies were often dismissed, ridiculed, or buried, but they remained chilling proof that the filth of slavery reached even into the chambers history dared not illuminate. Abolitionists sometimes recorded these whispers, careful to reveal them without shattering the fragile sensibilities of white audiences. Still, the truths slipped through. Hints of mistresses who bore children that looked nothing like their husbands, scandals that rippled through plantation gossip before being smothered by silence, evidence hid in letters, in wills where property was carefully divided to erase shame, in family Bibles where some names were scratched out, as if the blood that birthed them could be erased with ink. But history has a way of unearthing what's buried. Today, DNA testing exposes the lies. Descendants discover that the portraits on their grandmother's wall hide bloodlines she never spoke of. Black families find confirmation of stories whispered for generations, the unspeakable truths that their ancestors carried in silence. White families, confronted with evidence of their foremothers' obsessions, often choose denial, shame, or silence. The past crawls back through the soil, demanding to be seen, whether people are ready or not. And society, it resists. Mainstream history preferred to see white women as fragile flowers, victims of patriarchy, incapable of cruelty. The disturbing image of a mistress locking doors, summoning enslaved men into secret rooms, and wielding power in the most intimate, filthy ways. That image shatters the myth. It exposes her not as victim, but as predator. And predators wrapped in lace and hymns were never supposed to exist in the clean story America told itself. But every portrait of a gentlewoman hides the muffled cries of men she controlled. Every heirloom pearl is stained with silence. Every polished plantation diary omits the dirtiest pages, the ones that would have broken the illusion of purity. Why did these secrets stay hidden so long? Because they were too disturbing to confront, too filthy to fit the myth, too dangerous to tell in a society that built itself on the bodies of black men and women and needed to believe its oppressors were noble. But hidden truth has a pulse. It beats softly at first, then louder, until it demands recognition. Theories whisper explanations. Some say mistresses, trapped under patriarchal husbands, sought control where they could find it, over enslaved men who had no power to refuse. Others argue it was the forbidden allure, a lust fueled by racial stereotypes and fantasies, a dirty curiosity made intoxicating by its secrecy. Still others see it not as passion at all, but as domination disguised as desire, a cruel game of humiliation, control, and power addiction. Perhaps it was all of these, tangled together in shadows. Psychologists speak of the thrill of secrecy, how hidden acts intensify desire. On plantations, secrecy became oxygen, feeding obsessions, protecting reputations, and hiding filthy addictions to domination. These weren't acts of love. They weren't even acts of lust. They were acts of power cloaked in silk, unspeakable rituals that thrived in silence. And so we return to the portraits. White women painted in soft light, framed as symbols of purity, innocence, and grace. But what if behind every pearl necklace lies a filthy lie? What if every smile hides a locked room, every hymn drowns out a muffled cry, every glove conceals a hand that commanded unspeakable acts? The final reflection lingers in silence. Enslaved men forced into rooms they could never escape, dignity erased, generations scarred by trauma whispered through bloodlines. White mistresses remembered as delicate, while their darkest acts went unspoken. The legacy still echoes in families, in culture, in the wounds of history that remain open. Behind the silks and pearls live filthy truths, unspeakable acts that history tried to bury. But they cannot stay buried, because every hidden truth leaves an echo, every locked room leaves a shadow, and every disturbing act leaves a scar that time alone cannot heal. History may polish its portraits, but the dirt seeps through. And when these secrets surface, they remind us that behind every myth of gentility lies a disturbing reality. One that still haunts us, one that breaks your heart, one that forces us to ask the question, when we say the past is gone, are we lying to ourselves?